to the start of the Yosemite Gateway Partners quarterly meeting for April 14th. And for those that just joined us, welcome. As you know, our format has been be the Zoom our 9:30 to 10 sort of our quick chat and open mic, and then the meeting starting at 10, going till noon. So again, welcome everybody to the Yosemite Gateway Partners quarterly meeting. I'm Jeff Gabriel, the current president of Yosemite Gateway Partners, and what I would like to do is to spend the first 10 minutes or so of our meeting again talking about our great friend Miguel. I think everybody has attended the earlier part, the 9:30 to 10, recognized what a great man he was. I certainly found his questions to be most challenging and intriguing. In most cases, when somebody asks you a question, you can pretty much figure out what they want the answer to be. But for Miguel, he was good. You never knew what his answer he was expecting for you to say. And so, which caused you to actually be honest. Not to say that I'm dishonest, but it caused you to be much more honest in your response. So he will be greatly missed. So I'd like to do is to turn it over to Les, and Les, I'll let you sort of take it from here, and along with Connie or Candy. Sorry.
So who's taking it, me or Candy?
You first. Go, Les.
Oh, okay. It's wonderful to see everybody here today, and I think the greatest tribute to Miguel is the fact that we have so many people who are here who wish to be here with Miguel. Boy, I knew him for, I only wish I had known him for as long as so many of you have. I knew him for only about 15 years, and I remember my very first memory of that man was not seeing him, but hearing him, because there was this booming voice somewhere behind me, and I turned around and there was this majestic presence, and he was very much as larger than life as anything in Yosemite. And we were introduced, and for those of you who knew him or maybe didn't know him that well, he looked like a big, well, he was intimidating. He was huge, but that man had such an incredible soul, an incredible heart. And Candy did mention that he was the conscience of the organization. I want to say he was also the heart. He was love just poured out of that man. And some of the best times that I spent with him were ones that did not involve YGP, being away from everybody else. He would come to our MSO concerts in the park, and I remember, I think that may have been the first time I met Sally at one of those concerts back 2009 or so. And there was this man with that camera, and he took some wonderful shots of the orchestra, was always polite, always wanted to know if it was okay. And as a matter of fact, I used one of his shots from the Awani in a lot of my communications, and it's attributed to him. And there was just so much people have touched upon, and Jeff, you said this, how he kept you honest. And that's absolutely clear, because whenever I would say something, probably in the back of my mind, I knew that very soon there would be this challenge from Miguel to think outside the box. And he did force me to see things in a completely different, completely new light. And and I'm so grateful to him for that, because I still now try to think, what would Miguel think? What would Miguel say? What would Miguel do? And I think one of my greatest fears about Miguel was that I would say something that would really truly irritate him. And I know that I did. I probably upset him from time to time over the years, and I always hoped that somehow I made it up to him. Boy, again, what people have said, I don't fully miss him yet, because I feel he's there. I feel he is here with all of us. He is certainly part of Yosemite. He is certainly part of the region. He is certainly part of the great big world that we all live in. And boy, uh, Miguel, you're there and you're with us. You've made me a better person. Thank you.
Thanks, Les. Candy,
May,
did you want to?
may I say something? Because,
Yeah, because we'd like to have you say something, Sally. So
well,
what,
I know you're going to be going into your meeting and I don't want to interrupt that at all. And we will be going actually in a few minutes as we finish with this Zoom connection with you all. We are going to jump in the cars and we are going to go to Yosemite to be there today, just to have that connection with Yosemite that he loved so much. And my final goodbye to all of you. Thank you, thank you so much for all of your, uh, everything you said was so special to me that I will, I wished I had had a recorder that he had because he always recorded things. But what I want to leave you with is I wish for you, each of you individually, to have the kind of love that I had for 40 years. That is Miguel coming through me to you as a prayer for each of you, because I had that love and I'm very grateful for it. Thank you.
thank you, Sally, and thank you for the family, you and your family joining us today. And our hearts and our prayers are with you.
Well, we've had a beautiful tribute to Miguel. He would, I'm sure he is basking in it right now. And I don't have a whole lot more to say for anybody who just tuned in. We are sharing our memories of Miguel Maldonado, who actually got the nonprofit going that has brought us together this morning. I think he was prepared spiritually for what happened. He and I both had problems with our gallbladders for years, and we faced them together and we talked about them. And when I had a gallbladder attack at a YGP dinner in Mariposa one night, he drove me home and sat with me until it eased. I had a successful operation to remove mine 7 years ago, which is hard to believe it was that long ago. I had to look that up for this. He put off surgery for years by watching his diet and following his mother's food regimen. And I'm just very glad we had those years. I really appreciate it. And again, as I say, I think he was spiritually prepared for where he is now.
Great. Thank you, Candy. And again, Sally, thank you to you and your family. Have a safe travel to Yosemite today. And we wish you good
Thank you.
spirit.
Thank you.
So what I'd like to do is transition now into the part of our YGP quarterly meeting. And I'm going to turn it over to Rosemary, who was gracious and accepting of the challenge of putting today's session together. So I turn it over to Rosemary and she will take us to the top of the hour.
Okay, thank you, Jeff, and thank you all for participating in the memorial for Miguel. It was, as Candy said, a beautiful tribute to him. And I want to thank you for being here for the panel discussion. I am a YGP board member, and as Jeff said, I took on the challenge of putting together a panel for this morning's meeting. We had hoped that it would be in person, but we're not quite there yet. The objective of this panel is to find out how other communities around parks where reservation systems have been implemented are what they're doing to survive and maybe even prosper in light of the reservation system in their national park. and basically to learn from other communities and to widen our conversation to include other communities around national parks. So this morning, I will introduce our first speaker, who is Racine Freedy. Before I do that, I wanted to mention that what I'd like to do, what we would like to do, is focus on a discussion after Racine and Shelby Hampton present information on their experience and their response to the institution of the reservation system in Glacier National Park. If there are questions of clarification, please feel free to raise your hand. But for questions of discussion, I'm hoping that we can put that off until Shelby Hampton has concluded her remarks. So with that, I will introduce Racine Freedy. She is the president, CEO of Glacier Country Tourism. She comes from a small Montana cattle town of Orlando. She grew up on the southern end of the crown of the continent, an upbringing that helped her establish her inherent love for big sky country. She has a bachelor's degree in communication from Montana State University. She spent the majority of her professional career promoting travel and tourism to Montana. With 30 years of marketing experience, 15 of which is as president and CEO for Glacier County Tourism, Racine has played an active role in helping to make tourism one of the top 2 industries in the state. In addition to heading one of Montana's largest destination marketing, management, and stewardship organizations, Racine is actively involved with tourism matters to Montana, Voices of Montana Tourism, and Destinations International. And with that, I will turn it over to Racine Freedy. And thanks for being here, Racine.
Well, thank you so much. And I just appreciate the invitation, and what a touching conversation that led into it. What a wonderful group of people, and such incredible leadership that you've had over the years. So would you, would you like me to start off with a particular question?
Well, Racine, we talked on the phone. I think I was hoping that you could start with a description of how the reservation system was instituted at Glacier, and what kinds of strategies and messaging tactics your organization and perhaps other partner agencies instituted in order to respond to that implementation.
Sounds great. Well, first of all, what was the reason behind the reservation system? And Yosemite, Glacier, I'm sure we've been seeing many of the same issues, particularly once the Find Your Park campaign came out many years ago. The park system felt like people were losing their relationships with our public lands and our national parks. And they created this campaign called Find Your Park. And it was more successful than I think anyone could have possibly imagined, because what it did is it brought people back to the national parks. And of course, Glacier National Park just saw this increase of visitation. And with that was kind of a diminished visitor experience. We were seeing really long wait lines. There was little or no parking. You would have to circle the parking lots at Logan Pass over and over and over again just to be able to find a place. There was really an increase of emergency phone calls, heavy use of the trails, of people being kind of ill prepared. And that didn't get better with the pandemic. It actually got worse. So what happened with Glacier's reservation system is, first off, in 2020, when the pandemic first started, they started talking about this reservation system. We saw this huge influx of visitors coming to Montana that were all about outdoor recreation. They were camping, they were being both in established campgrounds, dispersed campgrounds, staying in Airbnbs. They were just out and about on the land. And as soon as Glacier National Park opened back up, because it did close down for a few months, there was this huge influx of people. And what also caused a problem is that the eastern side of Glacier is runs into the Blackfeet Reservation. The Blackfeet Reservation remained closed for a year. So all of the traffic with Glacier was coming in and coming out on the west side. So it really amplified problems. They started talking about the reservation system, decided that it was not a good idea to implement it mid-year in 2020. So in 2021, at the beginning of the year, we started the process. And when I say we, it really was a collaborative effort. The park was really looking at the logistics of the system. What they did is they pulled us into that process, and us meaning the destination marketing organizations that market to the visitor, both in the planning process of their visitation as well as when they're on the ground. And so we helped them create a communication strategy on how to get the word out about the plan, also to really become in alignment with their strategy. We asked a ton of questions. We asked for clarification on issues. We presented scenarios to them, and they truly listened to a lot of the things that we talked about, taking that and then fine-tuning their webpage with their FAQs and the wording and such. They communicated the information about the system to the businesses, to the greater communities around there. And then we took on the strategy of communicating to people who were in the planning process or people who were on the ground. The businesses took up the strategy of communicating with their customers, the people who had already made bookings or were making bookings. It was a truly collaborative approach, and it was not easy. I'm going to admit it wasn't necessarily a completely smooth process, but I think what we did with that collaboration and partnership was make it a lot smoother than we ever could have imagined that it would have been. And it worked well. I mean, there was certainly some hiccups. I think the people who had the most issues with it were the locals. You know, that's our national park. We want to be able to have access to it. But it wasn't closed for the whole time. The ticketed entry only applied from 6 a.m. to 5 p.m. Outside those hours, you could go in, you just needed the pass. There were workarounds. We helped communicate those workarounds. We had an added challenge of last year, we had road construction that went around the entire perimeter of the park. And so we actually brought the Department of Transportation into our conversations. We implemented their construction messaging into ours so that we were trying to make sure that everybody was aware of exactly what the situation was. And we also worked collaboratively with the park on what there was to see and do outside the park. We, Glacier Country, actually created a landing page that they linked out to that was all about the things to do outside the park when people may not have been able to get in with that ticket. And so that is just a really great system. And from what we know, was really one of a kind. We'd never really heard of that happening before. And it's really worked incredibly well going into this year. Also going into this year, we all came together again. We actually meet monthly, this whole group of people. We've been doing that since the beginning of the pandemic. But as we started looking at the 2022 system, we started to look at what were the challenges, while the park worked on the logistics of fine tuning, we helped work on the communications logistics, the things that visitors were confused about, maybe the things that we needed to be a little bit more concise in terms of communications. And so that's when we kind of worked on that. We changed the name of it. Ticketed entry was very confusing. A lot of people thought every single person had to have the ticket. When the strategy was not to control the number of people, it was to control the number of vehicles going into Glacier. So we changed it to vehicle reservation system. And we feel like that was a lot more clear. And the response to the plan this year was much better, was much smoother. I'll be interested to hear what Shelby's take was from the business perspective. But that's really the ticketed entry that Glacier implemented, and how Glacier actually worked with all of the partners outside the park to help in this really massive effort.
So sorry, Racine, my phone's ringing right now. So just as I unmute, it starts ringing. So what I'll do now, let me just check to see if Shelby has joined us. She is.
I'm here.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you, Shelby. All right. So what I'd like to do is, Racine, maybe you could talk a little bit about how you worked with business owners like Shelby to develop messaging and to amplify that messaging. And then we can turn it over to Shelby.
What we did is made sure that everything that we were communicating was exactly what the park was communicating. We had to be in alignment with what the message was. And the park was just as active in engaging partners like Shelby and her business organization, and small entities, large entities, as we were. And the biggest thing was making sure that whether it was news releases, interviews, whether it was marketing campaigns, newsletters, reservation systems, reservation emails going out, making sure people were aware of things. It was just a massive communication strategy that everyone had implemented. And of course, one of the things that we did as DMOs is we implemented it into everything that we did. It was on travel updates related to COVID. It was in newsletters. It was on our webpage. It was on our social media, all of our travel media trips, digital influencers. It all was addressing the reservation system, being prepared, implementing that into a recreate responsibly message, planning ahead, know before you go, making sure that you are being aware and inclusive and kind to the communities. It really was a really collaborative, big picture approach, making sure that everything that we were saying was in alignment with the park, as well as sharing that message of collaboration and being prepared.
Great, thank you, Racine. So Shelby Hampton is the owner operator of Glacier Outfitters. It's outdoor recreation equipment and related gear. She has two operations, one inside the airport where, as I understand it, essentially she is a visitor information center, just because there are not other resources in the airport available to address people's questions. And so Glacier Outfitters becomes a convenient opportunity from the tourist standpoint. She also has an operation inside Glacier National Park. So she has an opportunity to see not only what the implications of the reservation system have been outside the park, but then also inside the park. In addition, I believe she is the owner operator of a couple of Airbnbs. I may not have the number correct, but Shelby, you feel free to correct me in anything that I said that isn't quite accurate. And we're looking forward to hearing your experience and in responding to the implementation of the reservation system at Glacier.
Yeah, well, thank you. And thank you so much for inviting both the conversation in general and then to me. And just to reiterate, so at Glacier Outfitters, my perspective is being from inside the park and then being in the airport. So there is plenty of perspective that I encourage you guys to reach out and seek. That is that in-between spot that I am not talking from. So I just like to preface, like, these are my two perspectives. And those are unique, like I get people when they come off the airport or come off the plane in the airport, it's anywhere from, usually excited to be there, fatigued, and they either don't, at least last year, didn't know about the permitting system after they get off, and then the initial reaction, frustration, stress, and feeding information of how to go about the process, to the other side, which is being that we're inside the park, I'm not seeing the frustration slash, that people are having. I get the other side, which is people are stoked. I guess in the reaction from the previous years, and I think that Racine did a good job explaining sort of how we have increased our population to Glacier significantly since Find Your Park. And it's not has not felt sustainable, nor I think that it isn't sustainable for us to not have implemented something. So it was creating gridlocks on our roads. So no one would be able to come in, no one would be able to come out. There's a safety factor that, if there was an emergency that was going to happen on the road, if there was a car accident, like it's tough to get to. So I think that from my perspective on the inside of the park, I get to see happy people. People are stoked to be there. People that are they're on the inside, so it's a little less sort of like the anger, frustration, and so that's a perspective. And the perspective that I would say to sum that part up is, it felt a little bit more previous to the permit, an angrier park, frustrated park, a park that wasn't necessarily for quote unquote the people, because there was just so much gridlock. There was so much frustration of parking. And it's not that there isn't parking problems. It's just, I think that with the permitting system, instead of everyone needing to push towards certain times of the day, or just a major anxiety, just even in just the morning, it was when you did get a permit, it did sort of calm down that you will kind of get into the park. It definitely I wouldn't say that the permitting process is creating this, but our park used to be July, August, like that's when the Going Sun Road opens, end of June. That's when things are like feeling like it's summer in the park. Before that, it's winter in the park in the mountains. People don't understand that. And so we are really pushing into our shoulder seasons. We are pushing to longer days. I'm opening in April. That's insane. In my opinion, I feel like that's a very different perspective than when I started 9 years ago, twiddling my thumbs in June. There's definitely a push into October, and then throughout the winter is, we've had our max numbers. So I guess that's the perspective that I'm coming from. And I'm going to talk from those two perspectives, being that, like, what's it like to first get I guess the other third perspective is, because we're very much an information shop, we, in a lot of ways, like a desk, we definitely invite the conversations before this happens. And that would be true of my also Airbnb experience, is like, we are constantly having conversations with people before they're getting here, trying to set them up with information for success. And if it's a marketing component, which I think was just talked about really well, yes, it is a full frontal marketing campaign. And if I were to recommend any changes that were to occur, if I were to have a say for the future, one is making the word of the permit very clear. So it's as simple as the P word, pass. You need a pass to get into the park. Everyone has a pass, a yearly pass. And the word permit, those are almost too similar when you're talking about it. And for us, it is the Going to the Sun Road permit. That's a mouthful, and not a really great marketing campaigns. So I would recommend that there's workshops, and there was workshops in Glacier to come up with like that, but whatever decision is made, that is mine. And it is all of our sort of goal to make sure that we get that information out. And if you're just hung up on like just a simple P word, it really can get a little, with a confusing conversation, a lot of information coming at people, that can just get a little confusing. You need a pass and a permit. Yeah, you do. And so that's ticket is what we, I think, are changing to. But like, if you're going to implement something, yeah, strategic implementation of the marketing wording campaign as a whole is important. The other sort of thing I wanted to talk about before I kind of talk from my perspective is the support of the front lines. So anywhere from like the businesses to the organizations that you guys are part of, to the volunteers and the coordinating staff that are helping and guiding people when they come into the park that don't have a permit. And that is probably the biggest frustration that people have, is they come into Glacier, they get turned off, they have to go through like this, they get asked if they have a ticket or what was a permit. If they don't, they have to go over down like a road and talk to these volunteers, and they're frustrated. And these volunteers and employees of the park have to sort of deal with that every single day. And it is, I think, imperative for a community to really gather around these people so that they feel supported, because it is really difficult to feel like you are just beaten down with frustrated people. It's your job to just de-escalate them, find them a solution. But to deal with that every single day, that's pretty hard. So, anywhere from like just bringing donuts and pizza to thank you letters to, just like when you drive by, hey, you guys are awesome. These little things really do matter. And I think it is a collaborative community approach, especially first, second year, to really, wrap around these people, because year 3, people are going to have an understanding. The other sort of last sort of part, and this is more of the parks perspective, is when you do have a major change like this, I personally would put it straight on the first page of the website, so that if they're, we are 30-second mind attention folks. So, if something like that, I think can also, again, be part of the communication. So that's like a quick, like dirty, this is what I learned if I had say in the future of some other parks implementation. With regards to being, part of the airport, I definitely would also, we are the sort of only outdoor shop that people, or shop that people can go to. I would say there's also the rental car companies, which also give a lot of information to folks. So making sure that just all of these little entities are on the same page, I think is really important. Because it's difficult. Like, there's 3 ways that you can get these sort of these tickets. If it's online, the app, or the phone system. And sometimes I've heard one is better than the other. From our perspective, we work directly with the park to get little flyers in order to hand off to people to sort of have that explanation, to tell them about the permitting process, how they can get it, walk them through it. The other unique perspective we have is, being that we're inside the park, how it has changed our business is, one, our walk through traffic has decreased significantly, because we don't have people really showing up as much as, when the park was fully opened. If you couldn't get up the Going Sun Road, well, maybe you come to Apgar Village and then you just like wait in line for a boat. Our walk-in traffic is significantly lower, but our online reservations, or our online traffic and our reservation traffic is exponentially higher. because what is unique about being inside the park is, and if you have a reservation-based system, like I rent boats and bikes, people can get into the park by renting a boat from me. So that is a unique situation. I'm not the only outfitter that has that, horseback riding, boat rides, hotel reservations. But that is what we have done. Well, not what we've done. We've always done that. We've always had reservation-based systems. It's just that has kept us sort of, I don't want to say afloat. It is where we are getting most of our traffic from. So, we know what time people are coming, when they're coming. We just have needed to modify our systems and the way that we conduct our business in accordance to understanding that we're not going to get the walk-in traffic. We're going to get the traffic that is a reservation. I'm getting, I was like number 4 of phone calls since I've spoken. We're appreciative that we were able to continue our business in that way with the park. I think that it is something that we also have modified because we understand that we don't want to be a loophole, but that people could use us for a loophole to get into the park. So instead of renting a ton of my outdoor gear, which are smaller items, I don't do that anymore. I had to cut any of our sort of outdoor rental, camping, hiking sort of gear, and rental, something like a product that is a water bottle or like a large, bottle or something for carrying 5-gallon water. That's just not an option anymore. We don't want to be used. So we have needed to modify our things accordingly because there was so much anxiety and stress of like people trying to get in any way they want. And I think that both we're appreciative that we still can run our business with what was a previous sort of reservations in general, but we did modify so that we aren't both used and viewed as used. And I wouldn't say that we are actually, like, I think that when you come to our park, you either are coming for hiking, and I think that it's actually been nice that they modified the way that folks are getting the ticketing permit. See, I don't even know what to call it. Is it a ticket? Is it a permit? From 7 days to 3 days, which I think has decreased a lot of stress from last year to this year. The stress that I am receiving from my Airbnb guests, significantly less. I feel like sorry, it was another phone call. People knew what sort of to expect more, so they're able to get on top of it. And the change in our system was 48 hours in advance, and really it's just the day before now. I think that was a sort of a quick overview. I know that there's so much more detail to talk about, but if you, Rosemary, do you have anything you want me to mention?
I think you've covered it, at least initially. I'm hoping that people will ask questions, but I'm really grateful that you mentioned the volunteer program at the park. I don't know that we have instituted anything like that where we're using a combination of Park Service employees and local community members to try to diffuse some of the frustration and tension that some of the visitors might have when they find out that they can't just drive right in. So thanks for covering that. I think at this point, I really appreciate your presentation and Racine's. I'm hopeful that that folks will have questions. In the meantime, Racine, you touched on sort of who all was included, and it sounds like pretty much everybody in the business community, the park. I think at one point I understood that other land agencies were also involved. So maybe if you could, while other people are thinking about questions, if you could talk just a little bit more about how big the tent was, that people might find that interesting.
Sure. One thing that we've always done with our public land entities is work together on crisis communication strategies. We've had a long history of wildland fire and smoke, and of course, having really good communication strategies with everyone is really important. So when the pandemic came around, we saw the need, and Discover Kalispell, which is a sister DMO in Kalispell itself, started having weekly meetings where the weekly meetings were Explore Whitefish, Destination Cal or Discover Kalispell, Glacier Country, the Forest Service, state parks, Glacier National Park, Montana Office of Tourism. And we would meet weekly and we were talking about what was going on, what the challenges are on the ground, what's coming up, what are possible solutions. And that conversation, those weekly meetings, have been going on since literally April of 2020. And what we did is when the reservation system came into play, what we did is just transition the topic. And we started utilizing those weekly meetings to talk about the system, what kind of strategy, name changes, asking scenarios, posting questions that we're seeing, and just utilized that opportunity to communicate on a regular basis. And I think what it really accomplished was trust, communication, and just the sense of knowing that we're all in it together and we can't do it independently. We have to work collaboratively in order to be successful.
Great. Thank you, Racine. Okay, so I'll open it up to attendees for any questions you might have. Am I doing this right?
Yeah, if anybody wants to raise their mechanical hand, or there we go. I think Rosemary Charles has a question.
Yeah, hi,
Char-
and I'm sorry if this was answered, but so it sounds like you were having these weekly meetings since April of 2020. And again, excuse me, I was ducking in and out, but did you have any other manifestation of this sort of configuration before that? You know, these multi-stakeholders from the groups you cited. Did you have a history of working on these issues before?
The reservation system, no.
Not the
Okay.
reservation system, but in general, in sort of park issues, park community issues.
Not necessarily park community issues in that kind of sense. Glacier's always been quite good in terms of having community meetings and trying to reach out. The one thing that I think we all have is this great thing called virtual meetings now that the pandemic has brought about. And I feel like we were able to take advantage of that, the park and whatever efforts we were doing in the business community, and had the opportunity to utilize that. And from all the experience that I have, and Shelby, please correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like there was greater participation in the Zoom meetings than what we would have traditionally had in the in-person meetings, because it just provided that opportunity for everyone, no matter geography or timing or busy schedules, to participate. And we really capitalized on that. But we knew we had problems, and the vehicle reservation system was one of the big solutions that they came around to. And I think it was the first effort that we had. And I would hope that moving forward, any kind of challenges that come our way with our public land partners, whether it's Glacier or National Forest or whoever, we're able to utilize this strategy to work through them.
Other questions from the group? So Racine, I'll just ask, I see Bob Gardner's name on there, and I may have mentioned to you that I don't know that I mentioned him by name, but there's a really inspirational, to me at least, group over there, the Eastern Sierra Sustainable Recreation Partnership. that they put together to address some of the issues you talked about at the beginning of your remarks. And I think you were saying in today and in our telephone conversations that you had already started some conversations about that need to respond to the increased levels of recreation and had begun conversations. I guess to follow on Charles's question, were many of the same folks that you have been talking with about COVID and the reservation system, were they engaged in the responsible recreation conversations?
Actually, yes. We were actually approached by those public land agencies, not just Glacier National Park. The influx of people, and I'm sure you're seeing it too, there's a new visitor that we're seeing that is maybe just a little less experienced with how to responsibly recreate in the outdoors. And they were starting to share with us a lot of the challenges and problems. And so they came to us and said, what can you help us? You guys are the marketing people. You do this. That's what you do. And so what we did is we started having these talks. We had already partnered with Leave No Trace and with Tread Lightly. So we reached back out, worked with Office of Tourism, worked with Leave No Trace, pulled in recreateresponsibly.org, created an entire campaign for the state of Montana, and launched that to try to help counter some of the problems, educate the visitor. And that's an ongoing campaign for us. Our entire marketing campaign is all Recreate Responsibly to this day. And also it's launched us into a whole other strategic role in that we are now going down the path of from destination marketing to destination stewardship, which is really trying to find a balance between the quality of life of the visitor and the quality of experience for the visitor. And we're about 2/3 of the way done with that process. But of course, everything that we're talking about all kind of funnels into that.
Right, thank you for that. Yeah, I noticed that under your signature block, you have a lot of the Recreate Responsibly catchphrases, I suppose, plan ahead and so on. So definitely you're getting that message out it appears in every way you can. So I'll ask, are there other questions from attendees here?
Yeah, you have one for John and then Bob.
Okay, great. John?
Yes, so good presentations, very helpful. I think I'm taking away a message that it's somewhat obvious that those people who have gotten in now, when there's been a vehicle reservation system, one, they're happy they got in. Two, they're having a better visitor experience because there's not as much gridlock and there's not as much crowding and everything. So it's obvious that there's some that have benefited. And then we're hearing an example at the airport, people showing up who aren't informed. It's a surprise. And not only are they frustrated, or those that show up at the park gate, they could be angry because all of a sudden they're finding out their plan has been, cut off. They're no longer getting in. So here's my question. This was apparently only in effect last year. Do either or both of you feel that the more that it becomes established and it becomes expected, yep, there's a vehicle reservation system, that there will be fewer people who are caught off guard and surprised? And tied to that, do you see opportunities for more distance signage along highways leading to the park, an hour away or other places, to get the message out there so that people aren't caught off guard? Or, you can't do that at the airport so much. That's more website and online communications. But are there ways that you see that could reduce even more the surprise for people who are caught off guard? Thank you.
Shelby, do you want to start that?
Sure. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. So I do want to say that we are still hitting record numbers. So we still have the most amount of people we've ever seen. And so this isn't necessarily stopping people from coming. I feel it's just not concentrating everyone at the same time. It almost feels like I would do a study of, we have transportation studies. I would look at those transportation studies because it nails down of time oriented and then seasonal. But yes, people are experiencing, they seem a little happier. And as Racine mentioned, we are getting people that aren't familiar with how to act in the outdoors comparative to previous years. And that is its own challenge. We are noticing that our areas around our national parks, our state parks, our state lands, they are getting beat up. And garbage is a major component of that. And so just want to kind of touch on that. And then to go back to any sort of changes, I do think that anywhere from, you really got to work with the frontline people. It's sometimes it's a face-to-face, but like the frontline people are like not necessarily the owners, me, as much as my employees, as much as the car rental employees. Those are the ones that are as much as the volunteers that are sort of getting into on the way to the park. So, off the top of my head, you get off the plane, I think there could be more information in our park or in our airport about, hey, did you get your permit? And then, yes, you will see a large electronic sign that says, there's ticketing permitting to get in the park. Do you have your permit? And that is in Columbia Falls, which is on the way. And then in Hungry Horse, there is, volunteers sitting on the side of the road with a sign that says information. I wouldn't say that they're extremely busy. And so I think that that we definitely get funneled to the park. If people have missed all those cues, I personally would be a person that missed that cues. I'm kind of a little dense sometimes that I'm like, I got to go to this and I'll figure it out when I get there. And I do think that through, year three, year two is very different than it's been for year three. You can see the difference so far. Year two versus year one, and year three versus year two, I think it will be a lot easier. I think people will understand. I wouldn't say it's changing people's opportunity to come. I think people are still coming. I don't think there was a big fear of, will people stop coming? I don't see that happening with the numbers, being that Glacier is like the busiest we've ever seen it, the park and the airport. And we also got a 30% increase locally, the population in just during COVID. So there's a lot of pressure in this park and this surrounding area. And that, the other part is, how do you get the locals in? How do you get, how do you not make it not accessible for our local population of people? And I think that is something that is a factor. I think that when sometimes you don't visit the places that are in your backyard as much. And, there are Montanans, multi-generational Montanans that have never been to the park that live 20 miles away. So I think that just keeping going with like the fourth graders, free stuff, just the emphasis of like maybe a little more local somehow programs to, remember, like, how do we get these guys back in?
So thank you, Shelby. I think we
Racine?
have about 3 minutes before the park presentations begin. Bobby, do you have a quick question?
I just wanted to know if there was actually any surveys of the tourists who got into the park in terms of the more positive experience that they had. I mean, we're saying that they did, but did you actually track that and have data that shows that the permit system really increased their satisfaction and the nature of their experience?
Actually, there is a survey that was done. It has not been released yet by Montana's Institute for Tourism and Recreation Research. that is going to be looking at the overall effectiveness, including the visitor experience. So we're looking forward to having that study out soon.
Thank you.
Racine, is there a link to that organization? I couldn't write fast enough to get the name of it down, but if you could put that in the chat, I think that sounds like really, really good information for everybody. Thanks for asking the question, Bob. Okay, we have 2 minutes till we turn it over to the park. Any last thoughts, Racine, Shelby?
One thing that I do want to talk about is that because it was vehicles that it was limiting and not people, when you look at the numbers, we had almost record numbers last year of visitors in the park. Yet when you look at the number of vehicles, that spiked, and then in the vehicle reservation system went in, and then you could see the number of vehicles level out. What it also did is it pushed people out. It dispersed people coming in to different times of the day, which was exactly the purpose of the reservation system. So, and then for people who didn't have the reservation to get in the window, what it also created was incredible demand for services and experiences that were outside the park. So while you still had increased reservations, because the reservation, like Shelley was talking about, that was kind of your way in. If you have a reservation for something, that was your reservation to go in. You didn't have the foot traffic, but the quality of the experience was much nicer inside. I went in twice. I hadn't been in the summer, and it's such an amazing experience in years.
Wow.
It was incredible. Yet it was busy, and the breweries were busy, and the ski hill with all their activities in the summer was busy. The lake was busy. It did not decrease the number of people that came at all.
Great. So people went to other attractions, partly because they couldn't get into the park, but partly because you guys had done such a good job of making information available on those attractions. Is that sounded like a statement, but it's a question.
It is. But we also want to make sure that the perception of them not being able to get into the park because they didn't have a reservation was absolutely incorrect. They just couldn't get in during the window. They could get in 100% at night. In Montana, it's daylight until 10 o'clock at night. And so you still had 5 to 6 hours that were absolutely stunning that you could get into the park and experience it. And actually, it was a better time to go because right around 3, 4 o'clock is when most of the other people are on their way out.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Shelby and Racine. It was a lot of great information. And I think the Yosemite Gateway Board will be talking about this information and how we can use it to increase the efficacy of our messaging. So thank you again for joining us. You're welcome to stay through the rest of the meeting. Yosemite National Park folks will be providing updates on what's going on their side. But thank you again. And thanks to everybody for being here.
Thank you so
Thanks
much
for the time.
invite.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Racine and Shelby. We really do appreciate it, and Rosemary for putting this all together. It was outstanding. Nice work. I want to pass it on to Scott Gettleman and take it away, Scott, and do the Yosemite National Park portion. And Cicely, welcome, and your staff.
Thank you, Jeff, and thanks everyone. It's good to be here. A couple of things before we get started. First of all, I'd just like to thank everybody and say how special the tribute for Miguel was. It was so nice that his family was here, and both what we talked about before the meeting and what was mentioned during the meeting was really special. And I think all of us would agree that Miguel is with us and his legacy lives on. So that was really, really nice and meant a lot. So so nice that his family was here and they're going up to the park. So thank you to everybody, and that was excellent. Next, also I'll echo Jeff's comments to Rosemary and Racine and Shelby for that excellent presentation. a lot of really great information. And so thank you very much for sharing. There's a lot of similarities, and I learned a lot, and I'm sure we all learned a lot. So great presentation, and thank you so much. And Rosemary, excellent job putting it together. And then as we go into our presentation, I'll ask that folks put their questions into the chat as we normally do. We've got 4 presentations, then we'll do a Q&A. We're going to have Weston Spiegel from Yosemite Hospitality is going to talk to us about their operations and what they're looking at in the summer. Then we're going to have Joe Meyer, our Chief of Staff, talk a little bit about the Tioga Road and the process. And then we're going to have Cicely Muldoon, our Superintendent, Terry Austin, our Deputy Superintendent, and Nicole Athern, our Chief of Resources Management and Science, talk about our peak hours reservation system and have a presentation. And then after that, Nicole Tucker, who is our program manager for our concessions program, is going to talk about commercial use authorizations and how you can all use those and some of the opportunities that are out there. So again, go ahead and please put your questions into the chat, and we'll go ahead and introduce Weston Spiegel, who's the VP of Operations here at Yosemite Hospitality. And Weston was kind enough to offer to share what Yosemite Hospitality is looking at for operations in the park as we rapidly approach the busy summer season. So I saw him in the waiting room. I think he's here. So you want to jump in, Weston?
Yeah. Yes. Hello, Scott, and hello, everybody. Appreciate the time. And I'm going to try to stay on camera, Scott, but I'll look to you if my bandwidth gets challenged here. Let me know. All right. So happy to provide some updates on our operations, and then take any questions afterwards if time allows. Timing, I think, will depend on how tough the questions are. But nonetheless, getting into it, you know, the Wawona Hotel, very happy to share that the Wawona Hotel opened on March 25th. And such a special property as I get settled in here that I've experienced there. And I may be slightly biased, however, we just have a fantastic team at that property that sincerely cares for the hotel, as well as some phenomenal fried chicken, if I do say so myself. Switching gears, housekeeping camp reopened this past Friday, the 8th. And COVID protocols last year limited occupancy to 50% at housekeeping camp, but we are back to being 100% open and are completely sold out for the season. Moving on and actually taking a little forward look, the Ahwahnee seismic project, I believe has been discussed for the past 5 years or so, does seem highly likely to take place this January. So the Ahwahnee hotel reservations are currently scheduled or currently closed. And that hotel is scheduled for complete closure for 9 weeks starting on January 2nd. The hotel will reopen in March. However, there will be some work that continues through September there. This unfortunately does not allow for the return of Bracebridge as we look ahead to the winter. However, we are looking forward to this amazing show's return in 2023. Our Mountain Room restaurant, community favorite here, that is at our Yosemite Valley Lodge, reopened on April 6th, just last week. Unfortunately closed currently. We'll be reopening again Saturday. Just a small closure there due to COVID protocols, but happy to have that community favorite restaurant back open. Staying at the Yosemite Valley Lodge, if you're not aware, we've launched 3 new dining concepts there at our base camp eatery. So you will now experience a poke concept called Big Wall Poke, a Mediterranean concept that is called Mediterranean, and a fried chicken concept known as Craggy Chicken. We are still waiting. We've launched the food, but we're still waiting on a technology piece that's still in the works. Will be complete by the end of May. It'll provide 7 additional points of sale to help with the high volume that we experience at that outlet. Moving over to Curry Village, the 7 Tenths Pavilion has reopened, which is the interior dining space at Curry. And this space went through an extensive renovation pre-pandemic in excess of $10 million and had not been open since this season. So great to have that back open and available to our guests. We also hired a very talented chef, Chris Jockson, has some experience throughout California and also over in the Asia Pacific as well. So excited to see what he does with his menus there. Let's see here. Rafting looks like it's going to be a short season due to water levels. However, we're targeting to open in mid-May and at least get into July. Maybe the end of July, but we'll see how water levels treat us. But we didn't have rafting last year, so excited to see that back and open to our guests. Switching gears to tours and transportation, really enjoyed seeing our shuttle service get back up and running this past winter. We hired a transportation director recently from a Southern California school district, and he's doing a fantastic job recruiting drivers for us from surrounding school districts as they go into their off season and we go into our peak season. So that'll allow us hopefully to have sufficient drivers for operations this season. So the Valley Floor Tour, what we call on our Green Dragons, the open air trams, began just this past Friday the 8th, and tickets can be booked online at our travelyosemite.com website. So we currently have 2 tours offered, 10 a.m. and 1 p.m. And we'll be adding a 3 p.m., a 5 p.m., as well as a moonlight tour at 9 p.m. Starting May 27th. Sticking with transportation, our hikers bus in Tuolumne will start June 3rd, as well as our Tuolumne shuttle on the 3rd as well. So the hikers bus operating 8 a.m. to 4:15, and the shuttle going 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. As obviously we anticipate Tuolumne having significant demand with the Glacier Point closure. High Sierra camps, moving into a bit of a sore subject. It was very painful to have to close these camps again this year. We had significant conversations with MPS leadership on this, and at the end of the day, due to the challenges we both faced, we just could not ensure a good and safe experience this season due to lingering impacts of the pandemic. Tuolumne Meadows Lodge, however, will be reopening this season, as well as the store and grill. And White Wolf has an opening of July 8th. And Scott, as I wrap things up, looking backward, we had a successful season at Badger Pass. It was really great to see that that mountain and my first experience with it reopened and available to our community guests, and then also the school children in our surrounding communities. So great experience for me personally to see Badger's first season there and have that reopen. But Scott, that's the update from me. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, great. Thank you, Weston. Well, please go ahead and put them in the chat because we still have a lot to cover. Weston, if you could hang with us, would appreciate it. And I'd just like to thank Weston and his team. They've been wonderful partners throughout the pandemic. And as you all can tell, there's a lot's reopening and a lot going on. And I just saw Rhonda pop up, will golf reopen? Yes, I'll answer that quickly. It will reopen. Weston, you want to give the date? I don't know it off the top of my head.
Yes, how did I miss that? That is a hot topic.
Yeah.
So I think it was Rhonda. Yeah, we will be opening. We're targeting an early June right now open. We're waiting for final notice there as we partner with MPS on this. An early June open. Transparently though, we do have some water challenges in Wawona where we won't be able to water the fairways. So we'll see how long we can operate that course sufficiently. Hoping to get into and hopefully through July, but with an early June open there.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, good. I just wanted to get that one in there, and we've got a lot going on. That's funny, Rhonda. All right, thank you, Weston, and thanks to your team for being such great partners. Next up, as we know, with April comes and beautiful weather is our anticipation is a good word for the opening of Tioga Road. And for that, our Chief of Staff, Joe Meyer, is going to give us a little bit of background and talk to us about where we are with Tioga Road. Joe?
Okay, thank you, Scott. I tried to share my screen and couldn't. So Scott, if you could work some magic so that I could, or share
Hold on,
that
Joe.
graphic yourself,
Joe.
that would be great.
Yeah, I'll
Yeah.
get you right here. I got
Okay,
you taken care of.
all righty, stand by.
There you go. You're set.
Okay, thanks,
We're all-
everybody.
Oh, good. Oh, you got it. Good. Oh,
Yep.
we're all having bandwidth
Okay.
issues in the park today.
Thanks
so-
for fixing that for me, Jeff.
Yeah, thank you.
So hello, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Joe Meyer, and as Scott said, I work in the superintendent's office as the chief of staff. And this is a graphic that shows what all is involved in opening the Tioga Road. And so, every year it's the $1 million question is when the road going to be open. I'll just tell you right at the outset. There is no projected date at this time, but we are very hopeful that it's going to be open before Memorial Day weekend. So I know that this graphic is probably hard to see on the screen. We will make this graphic available to you. I'm going to say just a little bit about each of those 6 bold yellow areas, kind of in the middle left of your screen: preparation, plowing, punch through, stage 1, 2, and 3. And I'll try not to have you read any of this because I know that's hard and impossible for some of you. But we always start plowing on April 15th, which is tomorrow. So we have been getting ready for that. That first bullet or bolded yellow where it says preparation, there's a lot of training involved, avalanche training in particular, because that's a very real hazard, a life-threatening hazard on the road. So we have extensive training every year about that and an extensive protocol for mitigating that hazard. Hantavirus is also a serious and life-threatening issue. We know that it's present or has been present in the past in Tuolumne Meadows. And so every spring when we go in, we have to very carefully inspect and clean any infestations before our staff can move in. So that's just 2 examples of the training that we're doing right now and the preparation we're doing right now. And then once we begin plowing, again, that's tomorrow. The progress we make is dependent on a number of things. First of all, amount of snow, that's obvious. But what's less obvious is, what is the status of those avalanche zones? So there are a total of 24 or somewhere around 24. There are about 7 every year that we have to be very careful of. And one of the hardest ones, one of the last ones to be cleared, is the Olmsted Point area. And we've had a number of avalanches there in the past. And if you're familiar with that area, it's bare granite. It gets a lot of snow. It slides very easily. And it's one of our trickier areas. So the progress we make plowing depends on the mitigation, the status of the avalanche zones. Down trees can also be an issue. So if we had some windstorms over the wintertime, the plows have to stop whenever they get to that down tree. The forestry crew has to come in and take care of that. And then ice layers. I don't know at this point. We haven't started plowing, so we don't know if there are ice layers in the snowpack, but that's another thing that can really slow us down. So that was a little bit about plowing and things that affect plowing. The third in yellow bold is talking about the punch through. And so we consider that we have punched through when we've got a single lane going through all the active avalanche zones, which really means all the way from Crane Flat to Tioga Pass. So once we punch through that one lane, then a 3 weeks clock starts ticking. And again, we don't know when that punch through will happen, but once we hit that, then the next stages start. And there's 3 stages listed. I won't go through all of them. I'll just give you some of the highlights. But obviously, once we've got one lane punched through, we continue to plow. We continue to open that second lane. We continue to work on the shoulders. We're still mindful of the avalanche hazard. We start getting the housing ready for the employees who provide essential services. And some of those go in first. You know, there are people who are plowing the road and getting the utilities ready. You know, getting the water and wastewater utilities in particular operational is a huge task and dependent on conditions up there. So in big snow years, it takes a while to get wastewater going because just the nature of that system, it requires, you know, for the water in the area to be kind of reduced. So getting the wastewater system is a big deal. Getting our communications open, that's both self-service and our radio communications, you know, really critical for visitor services as well as for our employees' safety. And then, you know, sometimes we get up there and we find damage that we don't know about until we start opening things up. So power can be an issue. You know, we could find damage at the utility systems. So we just don't know until we get up there what we might find. Everything that we do up there is weather dependent. You know, we're feeling good about plowing tomorrow and starting that. However, we do have a storm that we had just a few days ago. We have another storm coming this weekend. They're not big storms, but basically, you know, that brings things either to a slow or a halt, depending on the storm. So what happens between now and when we open is largely weather dependent. More or less wrapping up here, I guess I will note that resource protection is a big issue for us. Getting the utility systems working correctly is a big deal, important for water quality, and that's something we are super concerned about. You know, we have really incredible water quality throughout the park, and we always mindful of that. We always try to protect that. That's part of our mission as National Park Service. And lastly, I'm wrapping up here, but we had a briefing last year with East Side stakeholders, and Bob Gardner, who's on the call here, he's the Mona County Supervisor. We've been working with on that. He's requested for that briefing again this year, and we're finalizing a date. We're going to do that for people on the East Side. So if you're from the East Side, stand by for some more communications on that. That will happen within the next week or two, most likely next week. I will leave it at that. Pass it back to Scott. If there are questions, put them in the chat and we'll circle back at the end. Thanks, everybody.
All right, thank you, Joe. I appreciate that, and excellent job, and yeah, exciting time of year. So we're gonna transition over into our peak hours reservation system. A lot of you are familiar with it, and we've been working hard on it, working with a lot of our stakeholders. And so we have a PowerPoint presentation, and I'll turn it over to our superintendent, Cicely Muldoon, to get us going on talking about our peak hours reservation system. So Cicely, take it away, please.
And good morning, everybody. It's always nice to see the YGP again. A really rich conversation this morning. So Rosemary and all involved in putting that together, thanks so much. We've spent a lot of time talking with Glacier in particular as we moved into our planning for the reservation system this summer. So many similarities, as you heard from that conversation. But first, I should probably just call out Stacy Corliss on the phone, because she is the 2022 winner of the first person to ask the question when the Tioga Road will open. I think, Stacy, it was like on January 2nd. So you win this year. Bob should beat you to it. So I'm going to kick this presentation off and then turn it over to two of my colleagues, Nicole Athern and Terry Austin. But I just want to talk a little bit about how we headed into this season. We talked a little bit about this at the January meeting of the YGP, but just to refresh memories of, we're hopeful that we're on the right side of COVID now. We know it's not over, of course, for any of us, but we're on a better side of it now. So we shifted this year out of a COVID-based reservation system. But as you may recall from our January meeting, we have a good problem this year, but we're faced with an extraordinary number of construction projects going on in the park this year. So that the level of construction in the park through a great deal of funding that we didn't know would all come together this year from the Great American Outdoors Act. And as our colleagues from Glacier were talking about, the resurgence in visitation to public lands and national parks, which is a great thing, but has brought some issues, as we all saw during the pandemic, with dispersed camping and other things. And of course, congestion is nothing new for us here in the park, but COVID was an extraordinary public health emergency, and our construction coming up is is a different kind of emergency. So Nicole, if I could just have that next slide. So I just want to refresh your memories on everything most of everything that's happening in the big construction projects this summer. So as you all know, Glacier Point Road is closed now for 2022 for a full repaving project. That's a project that has been in the works for many years, working with the Federal Highways Administration. We're going to be very happy to get that done, but it's awfully painful to have that closed to vehicles for the summer. For the hardy, you can still hike up there. We still have trails open coming up from the valley, but no vehicle traffic in 2022. Since that's closed, we have another Great American Outdoors Act project at the Bridalveil Creek Campground, which is going to rehab the whole water distribution system up there. Mariposa Grove, we hope we're getting close to reopening. Our target was early Memorial Day to recover from all the damage that was done during those mono winds. That's coming along pretty well. I have heard we're having a little bit of a supply chain issue, but we fully intend to get the Grove fully reopened this year. And many thanks to our YC partners, our Yosemite Conservancy partners who are right there with us on this one. Moving up to the high country on the other side, Tuolumne Meadows Campground is fully shut down for a complete rehab. That's one of the oldest and perhaps the biggest campground in the national park system in serious need of repairs. So it's going to be tough to have that closed for the year, but it's going to be much better for visitors on the other side. We have ongoing projects that started last year up there on the Tioga Road that will cause traffic delays again this year, moving the parking off the sides of the roads and redistributing it in smaller parking lots. We're not increasing the parking at all. We're just, we're putting it in better places, and that all emerged from the Tuolumne River plan some years ago. So that project is coming together. Green Flat Campground is another old one that is going to be completely shut for the year and completely rehabbed. Down in the valley at Bridalveil Fall, we are in the final stages of a really fantastic project. I can't wait for you all to see it. That'll have to be a future YGP, I think. Scott, when we can get everybody back in the park. It's similar to the transformation that happened at Yosemite Falls. And another thanks to our Yosemite Conservancy partners. It's going to be great, but that area will still be closed this summer, which gums things up in the valley a little bit. And we've begun construction on our Welcome Center. As you may recall, our visitor center is shifting to a new location at the other end of the village where the old sports shop used to be. So construction has begun on that. It's going to be a much nicer experience for the visitor when we are done with that. There'll be parking and restrooms right there. People are constantly lost trying to find our visitor center right now. So I do think it's going to be a much better visitor experience. And that will be underway this summer. And so that's going to affect some of the parking in the valley as well. So that's kind of the roundup of the major construction going on. And so just to kind of reiterate what our goals have been over the past couple of years, in 2020, we stood this system up very quickly. We're trying to get the park back open from our nearly 3-month closure at the onset of COVID and keep it open. We were able to do that. We were grateful we were able to do that. Next, in 2021, we were still deep into COVID-19, so it was still public health-based system. Our goal was really to really increase visitation. We had to cut visitation by about 50% in 2020. And we were able to do that pretty well over the course of the summer as we tracked the transmission rate of COVID in our surrounding communities. And we provided the basic services. There were a number of things still closed last summer, as you recall, much reduced staffing. So this year we're really excited, I have to say, to try out this new system that is focused on peak hours and not day use. Terry and Nicole will talk a little bit more detail about that. But what we want to do this year is mitigate the impacts from all these construction projects, provide a great visitor experience. As they said from Glacier, we want granite, not gridlock for our folks coming into the valley. We're hopeful that we can decrease the wait times at the entrances and keep traffic moving in the park. We are exploring with the Yosemite Conservancy the use of volunteers. That came up in the Glacier session to help us out at the gates. We're trying to really take some lessons learned from Glacier's experience with a similar type system last year. And I find that just as a commentary on the first part of the session, that destination stewardship, I think, is a really intriguing concept. So I look forward to talking more about that with YGP. So with that, I think Nicole, I'm going to hand it off to you.
All right, thank you. So even though this year's peak hour system is in place for a different reason than the last 2 years, there's still a number of things that we learned during those times that that we want to keep for 2022. Those include these ways that people can get into the park with a reservation or with overnight reservations in the park, public transportation towards the shuttles, without a vehicle, the Hetch area still does not require a reservation. Local pass-throughs have always been able to come in without a reservation or fee. And we switched to a 3-day pass last year so that we could allow arrivals anytime during that 3-day reservation period and not have to enforce a first day arrival, which was challenging for visitors. And we have continued to provide different levels of visitation, different levels of passes available on weekdays and weekends in order to smooth out those weekend peaks. And what that does, it really allows us to welcome more people into the park during the weekdays than when we first implemented the reservation system in 2020. We are offering 70% of the passes in advance for the full season, and additional reservations are offered 7 days ahead. The system will also end on September 30th. And most importantly, we're continuing to monitor the system to understand how it's working. So if we need to make changes to better meet our goals or to help things to run more smoothly, our monitoring program will help us to see that and make those changes in a timely manner. But because this year's system is in place for different reasons, we are making several changes this year. And the biggest change is that the limits to entry are only in place during the peak hours period of 6 a.m. to 4 p.m. Visitors can enter before 6 a.m. and they can stay for the whole day if they want, or they can arrive after 4 p.m. Most notably, this year's system is not designed to reduce the number of visitors to the park. Instead, it's designed to spread out visitation across the day. This was driven by the concern that Cicely mentioned about the impacts of reduced parking and roadway capacity that could come as a result of those large construction projects, and the effect that those things can have on the quality of experience that visitors have, as well as potential impacts to park resources. So July 2019 is the second highest visitation month on record. And we expect that this system will allow for a similar level of visitation, but those visitation levels can come with significant traffic and crowding challenges even in a normal year. So we're hoping that by spreading out the entry across the day, we will see that we can relieve some of that parking and traffic congestion and improve the experience for visitors. A big part of the visitor experience is how long they wait at the entrance gates, especially considering today's gas prices. The long lines are going to contribute to stress for everyone. Last year, our monitoring told us that pass-throughs were significant in all the lines, but at the Tioga entrance, they made up as much as a third of the line to get into the park. And non-locals can still pass through outside of peak hours. So we're really hoping to get the word out to travelers who have some flexibility in their schedules or alternate routes available, that being able to take advantage of those things will make the experience less stressful for them and the visitors to the park. It's great that we started the meeting by talking about the peak hour system at Glacier National Park, because their system last year was really very similar to what we're implementing this year. We were able to use the information from Glacier's system to help us better understand the potential impacts of a peak hour system on our visitation. So we used that information along with the along with the data collection from Yosemite these past 2 years in order to develop a model to show what we expect to happen in 2022. So this graph shows the average day in July 2019 in blue. So the blue line that you see is from the shape of that line, you can see that we typically see a single very large peak in the late morning, and that between the peak hours of 6 a.m. and 4 p.m., we do see more than 400 vehicles per hour. Based on what happened at Glacier, we expect to see that we will see a large increase in entries before 6 a.m. when the system goes into effect and after 4 p.m. But that usual mid-morning peak will be lower because we're restricting access between 6 and 4. Within that peak hours period, we expect visitation to be a little over 70% of what it was in 2019. However, looking at the entire day, our model suggests that we'll be at nearly 100% of July 2019 visitation. So clearly we have some uncertainties on exactly what the size of these new early and late peaks will be. And we'll be paying close attention to traffic and parking issues so that we'll be able to maintain the effects that we want to see, which is that everyone who wants to visit the park can visit the park, and that the park resources and an excellent visitor experience will both be preserved because the visitation will be spread out throughout the day and the early arrivals will leave earlier, making way for the later arrivals, so we can have that high level of visitation and that high quality of visitor experience at the same time. So that's our goal for the system. With that, I would turn it over to our Deputy Superintendent, Terry Austin.
Cool. So again, the bottom line, as Nicole mentioned, and also as Racine mentioned, is that everyone who wants to visit the park can visit the park. And that's a message that we appreciate all of you sharing with your visitors. We are really excited to welcome everyone back. And there's multiple ways you can get into the park this summer. You can make a reservation for peak hours. You can get a wilderness permit. You can reserve in-park lodging or camping, or you can just come in before 6 and after 4. So we're really excited about this system and the improvements that we think it'll make for visitor experience. And we hope it'll be a memorable visitor experience in a good way and not one memorable for spending hours trapped in gridlock traffic. Can you take me to the next slide, Nicole, please? Thank you. So we heard a lot of feedback from all of you over the past couple of years, and we really appreciate hearing that from you. We've received some great ideas that we've incorporated into our peak hour system. So we originally were going to have the system be from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., but hearing from all of you, we've decided to shorten that from 6 to 4. We kept our 3-day passes. We got that great idea from Rush Creek, and we feel like it really made a difference last year, and think it makes great sense since that's how our visitors actually do visit the park. We've increased the share of reservations available in advance, and we've incorporated some public messaging to support our gateway communities, especially things to do when visitors who don't have reservations are in the gateway communities, activities they can do there, shops and restaurants they can visit, things like that that they can do in the gateway community. Next slide, please, Nicole. So last year we experienced some long lines at the entrance stations. Our after action review revealed that this was due to people who were unaware of the reservations requirements showing up at the gate without a reservation, and a large volume of visitors, as Nicole mentioned, who plan to pass through the park. So this year, in an effort to alleviate that, thanks to Yosemite Conservancy, we've embarked on a PR campaign designed to educate visitors prior to arrival and to spread word far and wide that if you want to visit Yosemite this summer, you can, but you need a reservation between 6 a.m. and 4 p.m. This is a multi-phased communication effort and will incorporate traditional media, niche markets, and Spanish language media. And we also fully intend to ramp up our social media as well. We'll be adding staff at the entrance stations and hopefully also some volunteers at the entrance stations to help with the lines and to help alleviate the stress that visitors feel about getting in. We've also improved our technology and can now use QR code reading technology for those reservations provided by rec.gov. These efforts are designed to improve efficiency and reduce transaction time at the gate, and ideally reduce those wait times. And as Nicole mentioned, pass-throughs for local zip codes are allowed anytime, and other requests for pass-throughs will also be allowed, but only before 6 a.m. and after 4. So we'd like to thank all of you in advance for sharing that information about the pass-through availability with your guests. It will be important for visitors to know that so they don't wait in line only to be turned around. It's also important to share that 4 p.m. does mean 4 p.m. And our hope is that visitors without reservations will be fully engaged in what your communities have to offer, and they'll have a much better experience waiting for 4 o'clock there with you than in a line. So, and also thank you in advance for sharing some love with the gate staff when you come in. I appreciate that information from Shelby. That's really great. Next slide, please, Nicole. We are excited also this summer to bring back our traffic pilot. It was a success last year, and this year will be interesting to see how it works with the shuttle buses running and with almost full visitation going on. So we're excited to see this in place. Last year was our first year in I don't know how many decades that we did not have major gridlock in the valley. We're really proud of this system. Really excited to see it return. Next slide, please. So this is our current situation with the reservation system now. Only 14 available dates have been sold out as of yesterday. So there's still lots of availability. Again, everyone who wants to visit the park can visit the park. And I will go ahead and turn it back over to you, Scott. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry, and thank you, Cicely. Thank you, Nicole. See some good questions popping up. We have one more presentation. We'll get to those. So yeah, we've been working real hard and again, appreciate the collaboration of all of you on the call. It's been a collaborative effort and as Terry mentioned, we're excited to get this going. Our last presentation before the Q&A, we're going to talk about commercial use authorizations. And Nicole Tucker, who is our program manager for concessions, is going to talk to us about a commercial use authorization. I can't say that. CUAs, make it easier, CUAs. So go ahead, Nicole, and thank you and take it away.
Hi, everyone. As Scott mentioned, my name is Nicole Tucker, and I'm the Chief of Commercial Services here at Yosemite. And today I'm here joining you to talk about commercial use authorizations in the park and doing business in the park with a commercial use authorization or a CUA. So first, what I'm going to plan to go over with you is some background and some law and policy information, how CUAs are managed, some of the CUAs we have in Yosemite and how to apply for a CUA, some of the requirements of those that hold a CUA, and also recently implemented our marketplace fee. So first, some background. What is a CUA? It's a commercial service. So basically it's a company or organization that's providing a commercial service, making money from providing that service. And these service and activities are for park visitors. So not employees, are geared toward serving the visitor. CUAs services are appropriate, but might not be necessary. So I'm sure many of you, if not all of you, are aware of the concessions contract we have here in Yosemite. However, necessary services is what would trigger the development of a concessions contract. So when we talk about CUAs, things like buses are appropriate. We're consolidating as many people into one vehicle instead of multiple cars, or accommodating people who are not comfortable or able to drive themselves in the park. Similar with guiding, you have experienced guides that care about the resource here that allow people that don't have as much extensive experience to safely explore the backcountry. CUAs do not have to operate if they don't want to. So we have some operators that operate 1 year, they are not required to operate for 1 year. A little bit more background continued on law. So by law under 36 CFR 5.3 for business operations, it is illegal to engage in or solicit business in a park without having a permit. So unless special regulations of that unit allow. CUAs are also governed by the 1998 Concessions Management Improvement Act, which really was enacted to improve commercial services within parks. And basically this law outlines the requirement for CUAs and provides basically the framework for the NPS CUA program. And so CUAs are required for the following. So any business or organization that takes place in park, on lands, or that's managed by the NPS, uses any park resources, or results in compensation, monetary gain, benefit, or profits, that organization would require a CUA. Next, I'll talk about how CUAs are managed. And first, the superintendent just doesn't decide what CUAs are okay and which ones not to offer. There's a whole compliance process, but basically basically the general message is that CUAs, to determine whether if they're applicable and would be okay in the park, have to have minimal impact on resources and values consistent with the purpose of the establishment, but also consistent with any plans, policies, and regulations we have at the park. This includes, any special terms, if there are impacts, any special terms or conditions would be outlined in the CUA itself under all of the conditions. And so, as I mentioned, there's a whole compliance process for determining whether or not to issue a CUA. And if the requested commercial use is consistent with the park purpose, doesn't conflict with any park management plans, policy, regulations, things like that, and the superintendent is interested in allowing the proposed use, then we go ahead at the park level and initiate that compliance process. And basically that allows NPS to really evaluate the resource impacts associated with the commercial use. So as part of the compliance process, the NPS has to comply with a variety of state, federal, and local environmental laws and regulations to determine whether to issue that CUA. And some of those include NEPA, the National Historic Preservation Act, and the Endangered Species Act. So with that, as you may have gathered already, the superintendent may not issue more CUAs than are consistent with the preservation and management of resources and values. All right, so CUAs in Yosemite National Park. So here, the term of our CUAs do not exceed 1 year. There's no preferential right, no renewal. It's a new authorization every time it's issued. If the information is the same as the current permit application, the park may use the prior year's information, which helps us streamline the process a little bit, but new insurance certificates, license, things like that are still required to be submitted. We have a couple different types of CUAs out of park, which is the majority of our CUAs fall under this category. It's applicable to pretty much everything except for snow chain installation. Some of the requirements under here is that reservations and payments must be made prior to entry and takes place outside of the park, and online payments are fine also. There are no limit to gross receipts. Things like snow chain installation, that is something that would occur inside the park during heavy winter storms. We have chain installers come up and they do their business in the park. And that obviously starts and ends in the park. The exchange of money happens here. And it is limited to 25,000 gross receipts annually for those. Basically, it's our one CUAs for snow installation. So this is part of the law. The idea was that CUAs are for incidental business. So for those opportunities that are located fully inside the park, if it is a significant revenue source, if the concession opportunity would be a more appropriate. So you can see here, this is a list of our services, activities, CUAs in Yosemite. Pre-pandemic, there were about, I think, almost 500 CUAs and roughly 300 road-based CUAs. Currently, we're at about 100 road-based CUAs and approximately 100 other types of CUAs. Under the guiding CUA, there may be any combination of photo, stock, fishing, hiking, step on. Basically, there's just that umbrella of guiding. There are a few unauthorized activities that are not issued through a CUA, so that would be climbing, which is only currently provided through the Yosemite Community School through the concessionaire. And bike tours were not authorized under a CUA in Yosemite because it was determined it would cause more congestion in traffic. So we want to stay away from that. And also, no commercial operator may pass through the park. So we don't want any commercial operators coming through a shortcut. So now I'm going to get into more of these specific CUAs we have here, the more general ones that a lot of companies apply for. So the first one is road-based commercial tours. All trips must begin and end outside of the park boundaries. So this is a condition for the CUA, is that road-based commercial tours, the concessionaire is the only one that is authorized to start their tours inside the park. And then I just want to highlight a couple other important pieces of information about California-based companies must hold a valid charter party or TCP permit and the California Public Utilities Commission. And I can put some links in there if those are needed. And then companies providing interstate transportation have to be authorized for passengers by the Department of Transportation. So the next part here, I'm going to actually hit on insurance quite a bit. That's one message we do want to get across, because we do have companies that come into the park and aren't aware of insurance requirements, and it kind of makes for a little bit more of a difficult process if you're not aware of insurance requirements. So specifically for road-based commercial tours, auto insurance is a requirement, and general liability insurance is a requirement in the amount of $1 per occurrence. And lastly here, for CDC guidance, masks are still required on commercial vehicles. Any guidance related questions, I didn't add it to the end of this PowerPoint, but there is the commercial services toolbox site to kind of get all the updated list on some things like masking. Okay, the next CUA we have here is point to point, and point to point is basically exactly what it sounds like. So picking up a client and dropping them off somewhere in the park, it's taxi service is kind of the best way to describe it. Under the CUA, an operator may pick up their clients inside the park. Technically, it is road-based, but under the CUA, the operator is not providing a tour. Therefore, it is okay for them to pick up in the park. Under the CUA, touring is not permitted, like I just mentioned, and it's used primarily by through hikers. Again, they pick up their client, drop them off. There should not be any stopping, pullouts, or viewing areas. And this service ends when the client steps out of. So for this CUA, a holder must either have the valid TCP permit from PUC or a taxi license is okay for this CUA as well. And then for insurance requirements, again, auto insurance is required. This type of CUA does not need general liability because clients are no longer clients of the CUA holder one system. So at this time, there is not a requirement for general liability insurance in the CUA. Right. Motorcycle CUAs, this is pretty straightforward here. Group size is limited to 40 people, including clients, guides, and support vehicle drivers that will come into the park. The insurance requirements, auto insurance, and the general liability does apply to motorcycle CUAs. And guiding CUA. So as I mentioned before, there's a whole bunch of different types of activities under that umbrella of guiding CUAs. And there are several activities from front country to back country for a few hours, multi-day. Some drive their clients in and meet them at the trailhead. And this CUA, guides are not required to provide. The group size, generally groups are limited to 15 people, but when traveling or camping in larger groups over 15 people, they must separate and keep about a mile apart in distance, and that's to prevent adverse impacts and help protect park resources. Groups that do travel cross country or off USGS designated trails, including fishing, are limited to 8 people. The insurance requirements here, guides can meet their clients in the park. Guiding companies that do transport are subject to the requirements of road-based commercial tours, insurance, and also that general. So then we also have your step-on guides. So basically kind of that is what exactly that is. These are guides hired by the client to provide narration during a road-based tour. They may meet their clients inside the park that cannot transport clients. So things like wedding parties, they might charter someone and charter a bus and have a step-on guide, join them to point things out. Entrance fees for guiding CUAs are per person fees. So next I will talk about how to apply for a CUA. So these vary slightly for road-based commercial tours and guiding tours. We have 2 people in the program that oversee, one oversees passenger vehicle CUAs and oversees guiding CUAs. So for new companies getting a road-based commercial tour, have to fill out a CUA application, send it to this bus email here. And there's also a mandatory 450 CUA processing fee. This fee does not include the entrance fee into the park, which is based on the number of seats in the vehicle. You can range from a sedan of 5 people all the way to a 56-seat commercial bus. Guiding CUAs to new companies, generally with guiding, we have them contact the CUA office just because it's a bit more of a complicated process. And especially if it's a first year applying, it's easier for them to talk through some of these application requirements. There's more to it. So, and so if anyone were to add on Nordic fishing, photography, additional services like that, it's like multi-activity. It's usually 25 for additional activity. Other CUA holding requirements. So you have to be a licensed business. They've already covered insurance quite a bit in other slides, but again, we strongly recommend looking into those insurance requirements before booking any trips. I've had that happen in the past, and it just makes it a little bit more complicated to get through the CUA process. Must provide adequate proof of coverage and updated certificates. Operators must agree to the terms and conditions of the application, but then also get authorization. So they're outlined twice in CUA holding story. So just continuing with reporting requirements, there are required reporting at the end of the year. So the annual report is a form that's filled out and includes visitation, gross receipts, total in park and out of park. Someone wants to obtain a CUA, you have to agree to share financial information. It is part of the requirement of the CUA. Also,
Hey, Nicole.
yes.
Can I jump in yet? I think it's a bandwidth issue. It's really hard to hear you.
Okay.
So maybe we can wrap up, and we're happy to send the slide deck to everybody.
Yes, this is
Oh,
my.
you sound better. Yeah, you want to just wrap up? That would be wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, it's just really coming in and out. I'm sorry. Yeah, just the sound.
Okay. Yeah, the last slide I have here is market price fee, and this is just kind of a screenshot of what the commercial use operator would pay depending on gross receipts. I'll just jump to the last slide here. If you are looking for more information, doing business with us is a great website, or you can contact our office for more specific questions on activities at US_CUA.
All right, we good. Well, thank you, Nicole, and thank you. Yeah, and again, we're having bandwidth issues all over the park, so apologies, but great information. And please reach out. We're happy to, we're happy to share the slides, and the same as the PowerPoint earlier on the peak hours. We just have a few minutes for questions. And I did notice earlier there were a couple of questions for Weston, if you're still on. One of them was about the Tuolumne Meadows hikers bus. And Weston, if you could address that real quick, and then we'll do a couple of part questions. And as always, we're running short on time.
Yeah, sure, Scott. Quickly, the hikers bus, we are striving to have 2 buses daily. So increasing from the traditional 1 that we've had from the Valley. And obviously just dependent on acquiring those drivers, but optimistic we can double against the historics and do 2 daily there. And booking, yeah, you'll be able to book those roughly 30 days out. So we should have those reservations available 30 days prior to that service starting June 3rd.
All right, great. Thank you, Weston. And then as we go into the MPS, there was a lot, and again, we're just running on time, but I'm hoping I can call on David Miyako. There were several questions about the difference. What is a local pass-through? What's a non-local? And the differences, just to clarify that. David, if you wouldn't mind jumping in and explaining that.
Yeah, sure. So we have a list of local zip code pass-throughs, which I'm trying to talk and copy paste at the same time. So I will put that in the chat here. And I think embedded within that question is, if there will be any first come, first served campgrounds. And the answer is no. And, just as you can imagine with our peak hours reservation, we want to be able to, control that, and, getting people to come in and just for first come, first serve will alter the use there. Doesn't seem like I'm able to copy paste anything into the chat. So just really quickly, and I'll run through it really briefly. Ahwahnee, Brass Lake, Benton, Big Oak Flat, Bishop, Bootjack, Buck Meadows, Cathy's Valley, Coarse Gold, Coulterville, Crowley Lake, El Patal, Fish Camp, Greeley Hill, Groveland, Hornitos, June Lake, Lee Vining, Mammoth Lakes, Mariposa, Mid Pines, Moccasin, Mono Lake, Mount Bulia, Nipawanawassee, North Fork, Oakhurst, O'Neill's, Raymond, Swall Meadows, and Wishon Cove are the local zip codes. If you didn't hear that or want to send me a message, I'm happy to send that to you.
Okay. Yeah, I think thank you, David. Yeah, and then I just to mention real quickly, those local pass-throughs, that zip code list was basically created a long time ago, and that's meant for non-recreational travel. If someone is going from point A to point B and lives in the local area and goes through the park, and that's different than the non-local pass-throughs that we talked about before, which were allowing outside of the peak hours. And so that's a clear distinction. So again, we're just about there, and just wanted to thank everybody. Please send us questions. As always, we're short on time, but a great presentation. And again, thanks so much, Rosemary, and our friends from up in the Glacier area. Great meeting, and thanks everyone for your feedback. We're really looking forward to a great summer here. Got a lot of exciting stuff on board, and so we're real excited. And again, just reach out for questions, and we're happy to send you either Nicole Tucker's presentation on the CUAs or the PowerPoint on the reservations. Happy to do those. Just reach out to us, and we're happy to send it. So to close us out, I'll turn it back to Jeff Gabriel to close us out for our spring meeting. Thank you, Jeff.
Great, thanks, Scott. Really appreciate it, and Cicely, for you and your staff providing great informative presentation the last hour. Do really appreciate that, and value the partnership that Yosemite Gateway Partners has with Yosemite National Park, and want to continue that effort, and looking forward to a very positive future. So as well as thinking again to Rosemary, great panel. It all sort of plays in together. We are all in this together. This is not one over the other. It's we're all in this together. So as we can work to be able to do that, we really want to encourage that and appreciate it. So given it's at the noon hour, and want to be sensitive to everybody's time, again, we truly appreciate you being here for our Yosemite Gateway Partners meeting. And we are hopeful that July might be a magical month, and we'll get to see everybody's smiling faces and being able to touch and everything for those that are comfortable with that. But it'd be great to be able to see everybody in person. So let's hope and keep your fingers crossed that we're able to put that together. So I think with that, I'm going to say thank you again for participating in our quarterly meeting today. And I wish you all well and safe weekend. And until we see each other again in July, be safe and be good. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.